Welcome to St. Mary's Cemetery and Funeral Center. Thank you for visiting Sacramento's premier funeral and cemetery location. We have a state-of-the-art facility. It's the best facility in the area, in my opinion. Additionally, we have wonderful cemetery options to fit a family's desire and budget. If you have questions, please ask. We have an experienced team of funeral directors, funeral arrangers, family service advisors. They will answer your questions with your family's best interest in mind. The more you know about us, the more you will trust your loved one with us.
We treat families with reverence, respect, and dignity. That is utmost in how we think about a death of somebody.
A lot of times, a lot of the questions that we get are, how can I find my loved one? You know, I didn't attend the funeral, so I'm not really familiar of where they were buried, or I'm not really familiar with the cemetery. So we just go ahead, we get as much information as possible. We get the name of the deceased, if possible, the year they were buried, the year they passed away, you know, any details if they had a middle name or if they had a couple last names. Sometimes people will come with the last name and we can't find it. You have to keep in mind that maybe they had a maiden name, usually women, so they are under a maiden name.
A funeral director is responsible for caring for a deceased loved one from start to finish. You are in contact with a funeral director when someone passes away. They're going to go to the home, the hospital, the place of death, bring them into our care where they remain safely until the funeral services. The funeral director is also in charge of all the legal aspects of a passing, such as things like the death certificate registration, the permitting. We contact Social Security. We assist the family in the questions they come upon when they're settling the estate. We're going to perform the funeral services, the vigil, the mass, the committal. We're going to oversee the preparation of the body. We're going to help them get dressed.
The first advantage of pre-needing is peace of mind. Why peace of mind? Because when that time comes, you already know where you're going, if you pre-need your cemetery, and you know what your services will be when the time comes. Secondly, your family does not have to worry about anything because you've done everything for them. Probably that's the last legacy or gift that you can give to your family. You know, when that time comes, when someone passes, the family is in grief. And once you've pre-planned, that's the only thing that they have to do, grieve. They don't have to worry about any financial burdens that will be laid upon them because you've done everything for them. So I'm so sure that the family will be very grateful to you for having done that. Third, it's a big savings on your part because you're locked in already. At the time that you pre-plan, you're already locked in at that price. So if you pass away 20, 30, 40 years after you've pre-planned, even though those prices have doubled or tripled, you're already locked in. So you don't have to worry about, you know, what if your family will be paying more if the grave or the price of services have way gone up.
You may have heard the term corporal works of mercy. The corporal works of mercy are feed the hungry, give drink to the thirsty, shelter the homeless, visit the sick, visit those in prison, give alms to the poor, and most importantly, bury the dead.
You know, it's important, I feel, especially if you've had a heritage in that cemetery where there's loved ones already there. You have the ability to pre-plan and visualize where your final resting is going to be at. So you can go and see where, let's say, your grandparents are, your uncles, aunts, whoever it is that you already have there.
Well, one of the major reasons you would want to pre-need is that your wishes are known to your family. A lot of times families do not want to discuss this, and when you bring the children in, they get concerned that something's wrong. But in the end, when the time of need comes, your children are going to be so thrilled that you did take care of this, because maybe they don't know what your wishes are. Maybe you want to have your full body present and a visitation and viewing, and that's something that your children may not know.
A niche is an above-ground space within the cemetery for containing urns that would have cremated remains within them. Most niches are able to hold 2 urns. We have some niches that will hold more. Niches can be made of stone or glass fronts and can be located indoors or outdoors. Most niches are placed on a wall, but they can also be put together in a freestanding location.
Catholic Funeral and Cemetery Services of the Diocese of Sacramento is a full-service provider. We proudly offer funeral, cremation, and cemetery services under the guidance of the Diocese of Sacramento. Families can take care of all their needs in a single visit. We can coordinate arrangements directly with your parish, priests, staff, and your family.
The most important thing that a family should consider when selecting music for their funeral service is whether the songs are appropriate for that particular service. So that being said, here are some general guidelines. For a family gathering, a viewing, an informal service, a celebration of life, or a video tribute, almost any type of music can be appropriate. Although the desire by some is to play their loved one's favorite songs, make sure that the lyrics are appropriate for the gathering. So make sure that there are no offensive lyrics, songs that will make the guests uncomfortable, or those that are too lighthearted or humorous.
As you consider funeral and cemetery services with CFCS, try to remember that planning is not a burden, but a privilege. Think of this as a gift from you when you pass to those who are still living and grieving. It is a chance for you to make your wishes known. You can be as specific as you would like. While it may not seem like a gift today, know that when the time comes, your family will thank you for letting them know exactly how you want your life celebrated, and for allowing them to focus on properly grieving versus trying to figuring out what they think you may want for your final goodbye.
To properly clean a bronze marker, remove the dirt with plain water and dry with a soft cloth. If extra cleaning is needed, use a weak solution such as Dawn dish soap diluted in water, and use a soft toothbrush to get into tight spaces. Make sure to rinse thoroughly to remove any residue. Soap and dry with a soft cloth. Please do not use any commercial polish, oil, wax, or any petroleum-based products, as these may turn the finish cloudy and cause it to break down and peel much quicker. To properly clean a granite marker, there are a couple solutions you can try. 1, equal parts warm water and vinegar. 2, equal parts warm water and bleach. Or 3, equal parts water and ammonia. Wet the stone completely with clear, cold water, and then take a soft cloth with the solution and start on the bottom of the stone and move upward to avoid streaks. Scrub small areas at a time, making sure no parts of the stone are allowed to dry. The rough areas of the stone may need the solution to soak a little longer. When all the areas of the stone have been cleaned, rinse very well with lots of water and allow the stone to completely dry.
In the Catholic faith, we do allow for cremation, but we do not allow for any type of scattering or splitting of the cremated remains. We believe that the body should remain whole and intact and be buried in consecrated grounds like we do have here at the CFCS.
When considering the question of whether or not to embalm, it really has two answers. The short answer is no. Legally speaking, we don't require embalming unless we're transporting our loved ones from here to other states or countries. But the longer answer really is that we here at Catholic Funerals and Cemetery Services encourage all of our Catholic families to do a full traditional service, and that being rosary, vigil, mass, and committal at their cemetery. And that we have a package plan for, and that includes embalming. And that really is the best way to present your loved one to your friends and family in an embalmed state. And that is what we encourage our families to do in line with our Catholic faiths and traditions.
Well, if you're deciding to be buried above ground, that's when you would be opting to use options like a niche or a crypt. Those are above ground options. So a crypt would be where we could accommodate a full casket burial. We can also accommodate cremation as well in a crypt, but again, it's mainly for a full casket burial. Niches take care of a cremation burial, and in that case you could have a single niche, a double niche, or as many as a triple niche here. Niches also have the option, both being above ground, of a granite outside, or glass inside.
You know, during a funeral or a time of death, when someone passes away, it's very stressful for people, and it's very overwhelming too. You know, I have personal experience, you know, when someone dies and they're constantly contacting churches and like, well, what do? We have no idea. So it's our job to make sure they understand what's going on, what's the process, everything involved, and then our job as support administration is to make sure that the funeral center itself is running smoothly so that we can make others' job easier, to make their time period very easy and smooth and less stressful.
The Catholic funeral rite is divided into three parts, each with its own purpose. The vigil, sometimes called a wake, is when family and friends come to pay their respects and remember the life of the deceased. The vigil is a service with sacred scripture accompanied by reflection and prayer. A rosary is often prayed before the vigil. Eulogies are often delivered after the vigil. The funeral liturgy, or funeral mass, is when we give praise and thanks to God for Jesus' victory over death and commend the deceased to God's mercy and compassion. Third is the rite of committal, or graveside service. It is our final goodbye on consecrated ground.
Pre-planning does a number of things for the family. Number one being helping to reduce the decisions that will need to be made at the time of need. When somebody passes, there are many decisions that need to be made in a short period of time. And under the duress of the emotional stress at that time, those can be even made more difficult. So pre-planning helps to reduce that stress. Additionally, pre-planning can help tremendously financially. By pre-planning, we're able to help a family in pre-planning both their cemetery location and their funeral plan, and do so with a no-interest financing. Whereas if somebody has passed and they have not pre-planned, full payment is required at time of service. And so there's a tremendous benefit in that regard. Also, pre-planners have the advantage of being able to purchase at today's prices and not using the services until perhaps 20 or 30 years down the road.
Well, at our Veterans Cemetery, we have two sections here at St. Mary's. One is our Veterans Honor Court, and we also have the Sacramento County Veterans section. So you have a couple of options there. We also have cremation options available. You don't have to be a full-body casketed burial to be placed in those locations. You could also be cremated. Or if one of the family members, the husband, wanted a full-body burial and the wife might want a cremation, then you have that option as well. And being a veteran out here, you also are entitled to have a Veterans Memorial Headstone, and that is because of your service to our country. So that comes with each one. The family would just have to pay for the setting and the base on that, but it's a beautiful bronze marker that is for their service to our country.
So personally, as a Catholic, I would rather be on sacred ground, laid to rest on sacred ground. And on the funeral side, on my services, I want to be taken care of as a Catholic, meaning all the funeral and Christian rites of burial are followed, meaning I would have my vigil, visitation, I would have my mass, and I would have the committal. And I know I have that peace of mind that when that time comes, when I pass, I am being well taken care of and being laid to rest on a Catholic cemetery, on sacred ground.
For a funeral service, and particularly for a Catholic Mass, the music choices should match the liturgy. If there are any questions, the pastor or the priest should be consulted for their approval. So first, we have the prelude music. Generally, that's the only appropriate time for a secular song, such as the loved one's favorite tune. Next, we have the entrance hymn. It's a gathering song, usually one that has a more upbeat tempo. So, for example, Be Not Afraid or Christ Be Our Light. The next is the responsorial psalm, chosen from the selected readings. It invites the assembly to sing the refrain. For example, The Lord is my shepherd from Psalm 23. The gospel acclamation should match the season and the gospel reading. So for example, you may choose, Alleluia, I'm the bread of life. No one comes to the Father except through me. Next, you have the offertory hymn, which can be a secular song or a non-participatory hymn if desired. This is the shortest segment of the Mass, as there's no collection at a funeral, just the preparation of the altar and the gifts. So for example, one verse of the Ave Maria. Next would be the Mass responses. They should be chosen from a Mass setting that's welcoming to the assembly to participate, such as the Heritage Mass or the Mass of Christ the Savior. Then you have the communion hymn, and this should be a song about the Eucharist, the breaking of the bread, the precious body and the blood of Christ, etc. So Supper of the Lord is very appropriate. Next, you have the Song of Farewell. This should match the intent of the final blessing and commendation. The choirs of angels come to escort him or her into paradise. So for example, the Song of Farewell or Go in Peace. Finally, you have the closing hymn. This is the song of sending forth, of taking the message out into the world. And so for a funeral, that song should carry the message of the promise of immortality or the second coming of Christ. So for example, the City of God or Amazing Grace.
Cremation here, what we usually do is we will have a traditional funeral service, which starts with the body present. The loved one will be laid out for a viewing. They'll experience all the different rites, the vigil, the funeral mass, and then eventually the committal. The difference with cremation is that between the mass and the committal, there will be a cremation.
Funerals give us the opportunity to grieve and show others support during one of life's most difficult times. Our prayers and actions show we care. We respect life, which is a gift from God, and we provide comfort to those who mourn.
You would go out there with me. I can show you where your loved ones are, and then you could be near your loved ones for your final resting place. That's a very nice touch when you're pre-planning, right? Because you have the ability to do that and to physically see where your final resting place would be. And with that, you know, you could also lock today's prices in because you're doing a contract at today's prices. So, you know, 20 years from now, prices may change. It doesn't affect you at all.
Well, there's quite a few reasons why it's really important for someone to take the advantage of pre-planning. Number one, it gets your wishes met so that everybody, your loved ones, know. It takes the financial burden off of your loved ones.
What if your spouse is not Catholic? That is an item that is not required by our cemeteries to be placed within the cemetery. Does not require that one be a Catholic. We are owned and operated by the Catholic Diocese of Sacramento, but we serve people of all faiths. So the need for being Catholic is not required. We have many families where that may be, where they've married in, or they feel that they aren't Catholic because they have not been practicing their faith. But all are welcome here at our cemetery.
During your first appointment with the Family Service Advisor, they will walk you through our personal planning guide. The personal planning guide will enable you to record important family information, identify who to notify, make your final arrangements known, and list the location of important documents.
When you are ready to design your memorial marker, you will have to meet with the Family Service Advisor. Once you've designed the marker, it will be sent to the marker coordinator and the order will be placed immediately. We will then receive a proof for you to review and approve. It is then placed into production where it will take anywhere from 3 to 4 months to be completed.
Our mission as Catholic Funeral and Cemetery Services of the Diocese of Sacramento is to be a full-service provider of end-of-life care for the Catholic and Christian communities. We accompany families as they affectionately honor their loved ones in harmony with the Catholic rites of Christian funeral and cemetery services. We cooperate with your local parish from vigil through funeral mass through committal, bringing to all the consolation and mercy of Jesus.
My definition of a family service advisor would be someone who is here to walk your family through the process of pre-planning your funeral and cemetery choices. but they're also here to just help you start the conversation with your family, go through the maybe questions that you have, kind of guide you and help navigate through the whole process. And then as well, we help families at the time of need also. We're also the part where we would help you design and finalize a burial by helping you mark the grave as well.
A columbarium is a group of niches for the containment of cremated remains within the cemetery. They can be in a single location, placed along a wall, or in a freestanding location somewhere within the cemetery, both indoors or outside.
So the corporal works of mercy are found in the teachings of Jesus, and they give us a model for how we should treat all others, as if Christ was walking in disguise. They're charitable actions that we use to help our neighbors, to fulfill their needs. They respond to all of our needs in humanity as we all journey together.
One thing that people need to know is the emotional and financial benefits of pre-planning. First of all, emotional. It's something that you don't want your family or loved one dealing with at the time of passing, only because they have so much emotions going at that time. The last thing you want them to do is to try planning a funeral. We see it on a daily basis here. Families who come in with everything done by mom and dad previously, and what a simple thing it is just to sign a piece of paper and everything's done exactly how mom or dad wanted it. And then we have other families where it's an unexpected loss, and the turmoil that everybody goes through trying to plan something when their emotions are running so high. People tend to overspend when in a situation like that. Pre-planning, I cannot say enough about the emotional turmoil and the financial burden that it can save families from going through.
When I work with families to plan their funeral services, it's often important to the family to celebrate with a funeral mass. But the question of whether to include a musician at the service often meets with uncertainty. Some questions that family members tend to ask themselves include, did my mom and dad like music? Would that be important, or is it necessary? And how much will that cost? So I'd like to share some words from the USCCB, or the Catholic bishops, about the funeral and the committal. At the funeral liturgy, the Church gathers with the family and friends of the deceased to give praise and thanks to God for Christ's victory over sin and death, to commend the deceased to God's tender mercy and compassion, and to seek strength in the proclamation of the Paschal mystery. The funeral liturgy, therefore, is an act of worship and not merely an expression of grief. The rite of committal is an expression of the communion that exists between the Church on earth and the Church in heaven. The deceased passes with the farewell prayers of the community of believers into the welcoming company of those who need faith no longer, but see God face to face. Therefore, music is suggested as a way to help the family and friends worship more fully in that celebration, to help express praise and thanks to God, to proclaim the belief in the Paschal mystery, and to join their prayers with the community in an uplifting and expressive form through the use of music. Music helps the assembly to enter into full, active, and conscious participation of the Mass. It helps the priest transition from one part of the Mass to the next. And my favorite reason to have music at the Mass, in the words of St. Augustine, to sing is to pray twice.
Being behind the scenes is very important, I think, because like I used to say, behind every great person is a great support staff. And so our job is to ensure that everything goes as smoothly as possible, not only just for our staff members, but for the clients as well.
Well, let me tell you one thing that makes us quite unique and different from other cemeteries is our Saturday morning Mass. It's something that we do after the funeral, after the loved one is placed in our care, buried here or placed in a niche. We have a special Mass, and a lot of our families find comfort and strength knowing that we are still remembering their loved one. You know, we do this about a week or so after they've been placed here.
So the Family Heritage Program is where you can keep a family together in the same space. So that would look like, or you could have 2 full casket burials, and then in addition to that, add 3 more family members, cremation.
Our teachings do not allow us to scatter cremated remains. We want to lay 100% of your body on consecrated ground, so when the end of days arrive, all of us are taken to heaven by our Father.
The way that you choose your final resting place, I usually start out with a family and ask them if they have other loved ones that are buried out here currently. We look there to see if there's a location close by. If it's a family that wants to add a full body casketed burial to their location, that might not work. But if they wanted to add cremated remains on any grave that's out there, we can always add cremated remains to that, up to 5 burials in one location. So if you have some family members that may want to be a full body casketed burial, and you have other family members that want to be cremated, it's nice that you can be in a family estate, and it's called a family heritage plot, which is great for the family, and that can go on for generations for family members as well.
It's cost effective in that you get to lock in the price, and a lot of times you can make payments versus having to pay completely upfront. So it can be financially beneficial.
In 1963, the Catholic Church allowed for cremation, which gave folks a lot more opportunity to have different types of funerals.
Our planning guide is a free item that we offer to our families that is really a training and tool for time of need to gather in one location as much information as will be needed at the time of somebody's passing. Vital information that's needed for recording of where or if cemetery or funeral arrangements have been made, what those plans might be desired by that individual. Other information such as financial information is contained there. This is something that we give to a family that they take home and they complete at home and retain for their family records, not something that we would do here and hold on file. Again, those records are going to contain information that would be at time of need that's vital for the family. Difficult things sometimes to fill out a death certificate. Information that would be required there, and most importantly, what are the wishes of that individual? What messages do they want to give to their loved ones?
The funeral director can help to connect the family of the deceased with the music ministers from their local parish, or with independent musicians who can provide music at any of our funeral centers. So depending on the wishes of the family, they can choose to have an organist, a piano or a keyboardist, a string quartet, a harpist, a guitarist, a mariachi group, a single vocalist, a cappella or accompanied, or a small ensemble.